Hi, this is Professor Hong Han Sung. The live session of the Module 5 Police Modernization will start in 5 minutes. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Professor Hong Han Sung from John Jay College of Criminal Justice. It is a privilege for me to be with you this afternoon. I read the questions you or your classmates have provided, and I'm thrilled by them. They are all very good and reflect your experience in the field of public safety, as well as your commitment to this course, because it was obvious that most of you have read all those assigned readings. So I'm going to address the 5 questions that have received the most votes. After that, I'll open up and check the real-time questions that you may be sending us and hold a dialogue from there. So let's start with the first question. The first question was asked by Hernan, and which received 6 votes, and deals with police formation or police training. He asked, how long have changes in the police training processes taken to produce the expected results in cases where they have been applied? And the second part of the question asked, how has the progress been measured? Okay, first we have to clarify there are 2 different scenarios in the reform of police education. First, there is the case of a radical revamping of police training to reconstitute a new force. This type of restructuring of police education is usually implemented in post-conflict transitional societies, such as Iraq and Afghanistan after the invasion of the United States in 2001 and 2003, or in states weakened by corruption or organized crime that are generally accompanied by other measures of police reform, such as the expansion of the force and the purge of the force, as well as the promulgation of new guidelines, new regulations to guide police action. A good example of new police education system is that of Honduras, which was implemented just a few years ago. In all these cases, the change, the reform in education is imposed or financed or encouraged from outside, by different donor countries or agencies to support the creation of a modern democratic police. That is, what it's sought after is a brand new police force. If the logistical support and the political pressure for change persist over time, the changes in police education can give very visible results after probably just after a more or less long period of time, probably of at least 2 or 3 years. It is a long process, difficult process of change characterized by progress and setbacks, and the presence of other measures such as the purge of corrupt officers and good remuneration is fundamental for the consolidation and success of these educational reforms. A recent study by the Inter-American Development Bank reported that the wages of police in Latin America are 16% lower than those of the rest of the public sector. That's really bad. Low wages are a risk factor that could derail or torpedo profound or ambitious police reforms. I must apologize to you because the additional or supportive readings that I identified are mostly in Spanish. But for those of you who can understand some basic Spanish, I encourage you to check those readings that are in blue, highlighted in blue, and are listed at the end of the PowerPoint slides. Cesar Rivera, an IDB specialist, wrote this brief comment on the educational reform of Honduran police, which was very interesting. It shows the content, the actual contents of those educational changes, and you'll find it very helpful. In second place, we have changes in police training that are presented as technical capacity building. They are targeting specific issues such as, let's say, preventive strategies of problem solving, training in the more controlled use of lethal forces, how to become a member of the SWAT team, how to be a proficient criminal investigator, and so on. In these cases, the acquisition of very specific technical skills are emphasized, or the know-how to deploy new tactics are the focus. To consolidate these learnings, it is important to implement monitoring mechanisms within the institution so that we can know how much of the learned abilities are being applied in the field. And it is also important to have a reward system. It could be explicit mechanisms of promotion related to the learning and use implementation of those new skills to reinforce the new behavior or service model in the institution. The experiences of many countries tell us that it is possible to achieve lasting changes within just a few months or to a year. It's not that difficult if the reform is well designed, it's carefully implemented. As in the restructuring of police education, this kind of technical capacity building has to be supported by other measures to be successful. And then how to transfer what is learned in a classroom to the streets where police provide their services is fundamental. As we said before, it requires monitoring and good incentives. Yes, let's go to the next slide. And that second part of Hernan's question deals with the measurement of these progress or achievements in police education reform. Typically, we evaluate the effects of any reform or the achievement of any training program through the measurement of some key indicators. We measure these indicators before the implementation and after implementation. We also measure exactly the same indicators between those police officers who have participated in these programs and those police officers who haven't participated in these programs. And when comparisons are made among these different scores, we'll learn if there were significant changes or progress in the police and in the community. Ideally, we want to see changes in the personal knowledge of the police participating officers. We also want to see that they change their behavior in public, that when confronting civilians on the streets, they behave differently as a result of that training. But we also want to know whether those changes have led to changes in public perceptions of police professionalism, in public perceptions of police legitimacy, and in public perceptions of police effectiveness. And here I want to emphasize a point. And we must be very, very careful in using crime rates or rates of violence to measure police performance. Why? First, it is because crime is caused by multiple and sometimes many different causes. And the action of the police is just one of them. Probably not the strongest predictor of crime. It's just one of those possible causes. And therefore, it's not a good measure. It's not reliable. It's not valid often. And also, an increase in the confidence of the population in the police can paradoxically result in an increase in the crime rate. How is that possible? Yes, it's possible because people feel more confident in going to the police station and report their experiences of victimization. Therefore, crime rates are an ambiguous and sometimes confusing indicator that we must use with care, always in consultation with experts in this field. The evaluation of the impact of educational reforms and training generates important evidence for ourselves and for other forces. And therefore, it is extremely important. We should evaluate, we should record empirically every intervention, every educational intervention that we implement. All right, let's move to the second question. This question is from, it should be Juan Carlos Arenal. There's an error there that I made. Yeah, this question received 5 votes, and like the first question, it's focused on police training, and like the previous question, it is also packed um, in two questions, in two separate questions. And they asked, what is the importance that the countries of Latin America are giving to the initial training and the continuous training or on-the-job training of the police? That is, once entering the police career, what is the weight of the training both at the beginning and during their work life? It should be. And the second part of the question asked, what do you consider to be the issues that at least the police officer must know when they complete their initial training? Fortunately, we have very good news to share here. In fact, there is a convergence towards a greater interest and capability in improving both the basic initial training of the police and the on-the-job training of officers throughout the Latin American continent and in the Caribbean. Usually, the first academy training lasts between 6 months to a year, and it is intended to train cadets to become a generalist. Now, we call generalists those people who know a little bit about almost everything. And that's the purpose of police academy training. During this initial basic training, cadets learn about administrative procedures, basic criminal codes, police procedures, certain types of emergency management, such as the handling of violent disturbances, public demonstration, or cases of mental ill people. They develop their competence in the handling of deadly and non-deadly weapons. They learn how to arrest, how to make good arrests, how to administer first aid, how to go to a court and provide useful testimonies in court. They learn the strategies and the tactics of traffic control. They develop their abilities in community relations, and they learn how to serve the crime victims during those critical hours right after their victimizations. And of course, they learn to patrol, and they learn the basics of criminal investigation. Again, that makes them a generalist. And then comes the on-the-job training that can be divided into that refresher courses or retraining part that are intended to reinforce the basic aspects of police work. And then we have the specialized training to produce specialists among members of the police force. As I said before, that's how one becomes a member of the SWAT team, one becomes a criminal investigator, or one becomes an expert in anti-terrorism. Police education should be extended throughout their professional career. And then we find that in countries where there are police universities, which is now more and more common, these institutions, these universities tend to offer tertiary, or that's college level degrees, to future police officers, and the specializations are built in different undergraduate and graduate programs. So they get both the generalist and the specialist education within those multi-year college programs. That's a new trend. I think it may become the mainstream in the coming years. It is impossible, I would say, to find a Latin American or a Caribbean country that has not gone through a review of its police training in the last 10 or 15 years. And the good news is that the countries that need it the most have gone through some of the most profound changes. Several factors contributed to this convergence in the improvement of police education. First, The high rates of violence demanded an effective police force. The need for better trained police is urgent. It is desperate. Second, there is a widespread consolidation of democratic governments in the continent, and that demands a transparent police, uh, an accountable police to serve a better informed population. We now have higher standards and higher expectation for our police because we cherish our freedom. Third, there is a large amount of scientific knowledge about good police work that has been accumulating over time and is now being introduced into the region at a very fast pace. And these bodies of knowledge and expertise are equipping our police, to make huge, big jumps, huge improvements within a very short period of time. And the last determinant of all these reforms is that extraordinary amount of money that's been poured into this particular field of police education by donor countries and agencies, because they understand without security, you will not have stability. And without stability, you will never have prosperity in any country. So an investment in good police education could yield very long-term benefits in these transitional societies. It has never been a better time than now to modernize the police and police education in Latin America and the Caribbean. All right. So the second part of the question asks, what do you consider to be the issues that at least the police officers must know when receiving their initial training? Okay. Before talking about what the police officers should have received by the time they complete their academy training, I will want to talk first about what applicants to those academies should have already achieved. Without a doubt, a careful recruitment selection of police cadets is fundamental to the maintenance of a force with high ethical integrity and a strong professional capacity. It is encouraging that we see this kind of progress going on in Latin America and the Caribbean. And one of the signs is this, now it's almost universal. Most police forces in the region demand the completion of the high school education, and that is having a high school diploma and having gone through a rigorous background check as the basic requirements of becoming admitted into a police academy. It also implies that the police occupation is moving slowly but steadily from being a blue-collar worker job into a white-collar professional job. And that's huge, because in order to better serve democratic societies in this century, we need police officers who see themselves as professionals, who are treated as professionals, and who perform their jobs as professionals, as the engineers, the doctors, the lawyers that we work in our daily life. Of course, having a history of mental illness, of substance abuse, or financial bankruptcy, huge amounts of debts. This is also important. These are always important risk factors to consider. And we should not allow young people with these characteristics to be admitted into the police force, because they could have very severe consequences afterwards. As the philosophy of community policing and problem-solving strategy become increasingly popular and widely implemented in the region, I predict that there will be a centrifugal, an outward movement from relying on the paramilitary training in police academies into a closer collaboration with regular universities that provide interdisciplinary education, because that's kind of professional police officers that we want to see in this new era. Um, it is when we see and treat police officers as professionals who make important decisions for us, who are accountable to us, that we make them uh, a group that's separate, that's different from the battalions of disciplined soldiers. That's the old image we have of police, and that should be replaced by a new one. Okay, so now I'm going to answer the question of Carlos. So now, what should the police have received from their initial academy training? Essentially, well, I think the most fundamental issue is they must have developed a concept, an idea about the role of the police in a democratic society. And then they must have developed the basic skills to fulfill this calling or this duty. These skills could include uh, skills for the resolution of problems, of interpersonal conflicts. They must know how to apply criminal codes, police procedures. They must know how to use legally and ethically weapons given to them. They must have good communication skills to deal with people, with civilians. They must have a good understanding of different causes of violence and crime, so that they can empathize sometimes with the people, with troubled people that they encounter on the streets. They should know what social assistance and public health resources are available in the community. They should harbor a strong conviction in the supremacy of human rights, and they should have a deep vision of the police profession as a service to the citizenry. Um, Now, okay, with that, we can close this question and we can move to the next question, the third question, which is presented by Pedro, I think. Again, that's a mistake there. And this question received 4 votes. And it's simple. How can we build and strengthen the political conditions for reform in police modernization? Professor Gustavo Gonzalez of Argentina, he had a very peculiar way to describe the relationship between political reform and police reform. And he called it a complex set of commitments, resistances, and conditions of possibility, which simply means that it is a messy but promising process. And we should add here that, at least when it comes to the relationship between political reform and police reform, this is not a chicken and egg situation. Police reform should always be analyzed in the broader context of political reform, and not vice versa. And police achievement is usually a consequence and not a cause of some political achievement. And the reason of this causal ordering is this: police chiefs, police administrators, police executives are usually appointed by politicians. And therefore, there's always a relationship of dependence and subordination between the political leaders and the police managers. Second, that rigid hierarchical paramilitary structure of most police forces does not encourage self-criticism, self-reflection, self-evaluation, and self-initiated reforms. And therefore, police forces tend to be conservative elephants that only respond to criticism and external and demands from outside for reform. Uh, Usually, after having committed a lot of mistakes and sometimes horrors to reach that turn. But we should not be pessimistic because the existence of democratic rules implies that we can do a lot. We can create, and probably we have created, political conditions for police reform. And we must continue to strengthen these conditions. I'll just mention 4 of these political conditions. Some of them deal with, I would say, all of them deal with the way we understand uh, police work, and some of them deal with how we support it, the kind of political support that should be given to police reform. The first condition is to move away from national security to citizen security. The police do not exist. No, we should say that police exist not to honor the fatherland, the homeland, nor to neutralize the threats against the states. The main mission and calling of the police is to protect and serve individual citizens. This is important. The police, the democratic police, doesn't serve the government. It serves the citizens. And therefore, they must abandon the doctrine of national security and the messianic complex that often comes with it, and they should embrace the mandate of citizen security. This transition has been promoted quite successfully by groups from the civil societies, by donor agencies, and by concerned citizens at large. In countries where organized crime or gangs have taken territories and are performing some functions previously assigned to the state, such as protection of the citizens, basic services. In those instances, the doctrine of national security often returns with the militarization of law enforcement. That is when, because of those serious collapse of the role of the state, we started to turn our police forces into armies. Or we directly invite the armies into our neighborhoods to do prevention tasks that should have been assigned to the police. And the normalization of this anomaly oftentimes turn the police into a corrupt and brutal occupation army in the long run. So it is our job. We should create that political condition. It's our job to keep preaching the gospel of citizen security, especially when security seems elusive and the state is failing in many neighborhoods. 3 measures can reinforce the practices of citizen security over national security. First, the police should consult with the public in the communities they serve, they patrol, to determine what security or justice problems concern the citizens the most. So that determination of service priorities should not be coming top down, but should come bottom up. Second, the police must show that when individual citizens seek help, look for help, these citizens will be treated promptly, with respect, and with effectiveness. Finally, to be more receptive, the police must make it easier, more convenient, and more comfortable for individual citizens to seek the help of the police. Then we have the second condition, political condition that we must create together. And that is we must move from being tough on crime, from that slogan, to the philosophy of being effective on crime. Governments exist to solve problems and to improve people's lives. But politicians often manipulate citizens' sense of insecurity and appeal to their worst fears of crime. And in the process, perhaps unintendedly, they encourage people to distrust their own justice system, to have doubts about their own police institutions. And that's not constructive. Irrational panic leads to ineffective responses like what's in Spanish we call mano dura, right? Tough measures of crime control. Okay, I'm seeing. Okay, I need assistance. Should I start responding to questions from the students now? No. Okay, we'll do that later. Okay. All right. So
Just one live question, but there's still time to continue with the presentation
okay.
for like 10, 15 minutes. So
Okay.
you can
Okay.
take the question. Should I move on to question 4?
Okay. We can do that.
Okay.
All right. So the fourth questions deals with police officers in charge of criminal investigation. It's from Flavio. And he asks, what is the ideal model of division of the police in federal countries? And what should be the proportion of specialized investigative agents vis-a-vis those who do patrol? So what's the ideal ratio? Any ideal curriculum to train the police? Okay. So I'm going to paraphrase what the Chinese Communist leader Deng Xiaoping once said when he said, "No matter whether the cat is black or white, well, if you can catch mice, it must be a good cat." And in this business police reform, we have a similar attitude. No matter what the police, whether the police is federal or national, centralized, as long as it can prevent crime and protect human rights, it must be a good police. Police reform has to do with changing police mentality and police practices. It does not care that much about police organization or structure. When structures matter, it is because it affects police behavior, right? So we always prioritize philosophy and practices, and strategies as the main targets of reform. And there is a good reason for this principle. After decades of studying police forces in democratic countries, David Bailey, a renowned comparative police expert, found that there is no particular connection between how the police is organized in the country and the quality of police practices. Democratic countries can have a decentralized police system, such as the United States, which has more than 30,000 police forces. And a good democratic police force can be as centralized as that the National Swedish Police Force. They only have one centralized force in the entire country. And then some strong democracies have relied on close political oversight for the police, such as the United States, where the governors and the city mayors appoint police chiefs. But then you have Japan, which has a very remotely overseen police force. So new bottles do not make new wine. Yeah, that's a good principle. Um, and returning to Flavia's question about an ideal model of division of labor between patrol officers and criminal investigators, I can tell you that it does not exist. That ideal split does not exist. The same answer goes for the second part of the question. Nor is there any ideal ratio between police investigators and patrol officers. In the United States, criminal investigators, or the so called detectives, represent 15% of all police officers, while patrol officers comprise approximately 60% of the forces. The remaining 25% belong to traffic agents and administrative staff and some other specialized units. But then if you go to Chile, the carabineros, which are the police that is in charge of crime prevention, they number at around 52,000 members, while the Chilean investigative police, which is a separate body of law enforcement, in charge of criminal investigation, has around 5,500 members. So all we can say is that countries tend to have many more preventive or patrol officers than criminal investigators. But there's really no an ideal number or percentage that should be imposed on different countries. I think different needs and level of resources should dictate the blending of these two main branches of police officers. When it comes to the content of training curriculum, I think I already have touched that subject. So let's move to the fifth question. It's from Hernan too. I asked, what are some successful models in Latin America regarding transformation of police investigation? What are some good indicators to measure their performance? That is the performance of police investigators. Well, criminal investigation has always been the weakest link in the police capacity of the continent. But there is something to cheer about, and that is it is also one of the areas where greater progress has been observed and detected in Latin America and the Caribbean, especially in Latin America. The long history of inquisitorial criminal process, where the judge or the court convicts or sentences, is also an interested party in the criminal process, has created a culture of confession. The accusation and the prosecution and the sentence could be based simply on mere suspicion, and the confession of guilt has always been considered as foolproof, or even if extracted under suspicious conditions. So as many countries, if not most countries in Latin America and the Caribbean, are transitioning to an adversarial system of criminal processing, physical evidence, reliable testimonies from victims or witnesses, and the technical procedure to generate those evidence and testimonies admissible in court have become crucial in the criminal justice process. And that pushes the police to do a better job in criminal investigation. Other events have triggered this acceleration, the speeding up of skills in criminal investigation. We can mention the creation of the International Criminal Investigative Training Assistant Program, or ICTAP, by the U.S. Agency for International Development in 1985. That program has spent millions and millions and millions of dollars just to train police officers in criminal investigation. And in 1995, the administration of Bill Clinton established the International Law Enforcement Academy to offer classes similar to those offered at the National Academy of the FBI to police officers in Latin America, the Caribbean, in other parts of the world. And then many other donor agencies, such as the Inter-American Development Bank and the United Nations, have also joined to help strengthen the capacity for criminal investigation. So the history of capacitation in this area is long, and the improvement is just substantial, visible. But we're not satisfied. We can do more. So the police, prosecutors, and judges must work even more closely to highlight the importance of physical evidence and reliable testimonies in the criminal justice process, and to guarantee the quality of these basic ingredients in the adversarial process. I don't want to highlight any particular countries or police agencies in their achievements and growth in criminal investigation, because I think the progress has been quite widespread. While some countries made more progress than others, but I think all countries and agencies should get the credit. When it comes to the numbers, again, there is no an ideal number. There's not a magic percentage. In the United States, there is a criminal investigator for every 4 patrol officers, and in Chile, there is a police investigator for every 9 carabineros. So what's the right balance? We do not know, but at least I do not know. And the important thing is to ensure that both prevention and investigation are carried out and are done properly. Last thing, performance measurement. How do we measure the performance of police investigators? It's not different from the way we measure other aspects of police work. We should focus on volume, timeliness, accuracy, cost efficiency, and customer satisfaction. The idea is that the criminal investigation should be carried out in as many cases as possible. It's impossible to investigate every single case that comes to the attention of the police, but we should investigate as many as possible. And it is ideal that the police investigation does not cause unnecessary additional delays in the criminal justice process. And it is important that the number of errors is minimal and is going down over time. It's really horrible to have wrongful convictions in the criminal justice system. That's a problem, should be controlled, should be dealt with. And it is important that the cost of investigation is manageable, and that the prosecutors, judges, victims, and the public in general, as the main clients of police investigation, they should have confidence in the police in doing a good job. So with that, I close my answers to the first 5 questions that we have. And now here, I think we have a live question. What are the technological innovations that better work to improve police management? Of course, now we're in an age of explosion, in communication and information technologies. And and these are the technologies that the police must know how to use. The use of geospatial information technology, or GIS, is pretty widespread in the continent. Wherever I go, I see training courses in GIS use. Wherever I go, I see police departments producing crime maps with hotspots identified on different neighborhoods and streets. And so that's a good sign. But we should also think about how to better use the big data. and that is the data that are automatically generated by communication technologies such as the use of cell phone, the internet, and how merging those tons of information, how concatenating those different pieces of data, those data that come in different formats. They could be pictures, video clips, text, people share in social media, how to connect them for intelligence gathering purpose and for decision making. We are still in the earliest stage of this process, but we have started. I'm supervising the work of an international student in our PhD program, and he's helping uh, the police of New York City police department in using big data to forecast future critical events, such as shooting, small scale shooting, mass shooting. It's a very exciting time. The more we use our all these technological innovation available to us, the more effective and the more transparent we become, and then the more accountable we become. Yes, I don't know whether Catalina, do you have comments or things to add? I'm sorry, I can hear you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It was very interesting. I have a couple of questions of my own, but I'm going to write them directly to you. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thanks everybody for the time we shared together.